Hi, everybody. I'm Louis Amestoy with HS Game Time Live, and I'm joined by a distinguished panel here led by the Prep Dog. Thanks for joining us. Also, Tim Dutton and Eric Paul Johnson. We've got a lot of ground to cover today. We've got recruiting news. It's National Signing Day, and of course, the Inland Empire or Inland Southern California is a hotbed for recruiting activity, and we've seen plenty of that today as well. And some other things we want to cover too. And first off, I've got John Murphy here, and you cover the Southwestern League for us here at HS Game Time, and some big changes down in the Southwestern League as well. Coach Tommy Leach, he's gone, but is he gone? That's the question of the day.
Yeah, he seems to be, as he revealed on Monday, on Friday, his principal, Gil Compton, gave him the option of being fired or resigning, and he chose to resign. Or rather, to be fired.
To be fired, right? Because didn't he say that to resign was basically quitting on his players, and that's not something he wanted to do. He didn't want to send that message, right?
Yeah, and most coaches would opt to resign because it looks better on the resume. But Tommy kind of stuck with his guns and chose to be fired.
Right. So in 5 seasons, he led the Pumas to 3 CIF championship games and won the championship in 2009 by beating Vista Murrieta in a memorable game as well. I want to throw this over to Eric Paul Johnson just for a moment to kind of say, what does this mean for the kind of the coaching ranks? Because a lot of people respected Tommy, but he was also sort of, as you mentioned to me before, a polarizing figure. Kind of expand upon that a little bit, EPJ.
Yeah, I think right now you have a lot of people within the coaching community, on Tommy's own staff, and even players. Some will say, yes, we really loved him. Other people will say, yeah, there were some things that we didn't like about him. So, that's going to be the interesting thing. What is going to be most intriguing is whether or not Tommy stays in the Inland Empire. There are no jobs right now in the Southwestern League open, but there are plenty of jobs open in the area that he can maybe look at. Does he maybe take a year off before jumping into some, a position that may open up? He does have roots in Pomona before, and his coaching got started out at Edison High School. So, there's a lot of places he can wind up. But you have a coach who went 47-19 in 5 years, got his team to 3 CIF titles. That's definitely someone who's going to be on the radar. Now, he also might lose job opportunities given some of his controversial issues that happened at Chaparral.
How would we assess him as his legacy as a coach? Let's go back to EPJ for a minute. Obviously with the 5 seasons at Chaparral, impressive records and some solid teams. I think he kind of got over his head a little bit this season with his schedule. But talk about that legacy.
I think it definitely is legacy when you look, 3 championship game appearances, a title, a semifinalist in another year. He's definitely a good football coach who gets his players to really play for him. Now on the other side, he is someone who can rub people the wrong way, and it could get him and his teams into a lot of trouble, as we've seen in the past. I think the one thing that I've always respected about Tommy in some way is he always speaks his mind. And when he went through a couple periods where he didn't speak to the media at all, I understood his decision with that. He would rather speak his mind, say what's on his mind, than say what other people want him to say. So I think that's where I respected him more, is he wasn't going to feed you a line just because it was the right thing to say. Right. So he would say what he wants to.
All right.
But I think he is a very good coach.
All right, Prep Dog, let's talk about for a moment what this means in the Southwestern League.
Well, it kind of remains to be seen what's going to happen with Chaparral, who's going to come in. I understand they have some good young talent, but will they be able to get the right guy in, and will he be able to bond with some of these players who, a lot of whom were fond of Tommy?
Right. Well, interesting to see what's going to happen, who the next coach will be at Chaparral. We have some other coaching vacancies that are being filled, or maybe others that could be on the way, but we'll skip that for now. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But let's talk about National Signing Day. Everyone has been out early this morning. Prep Dog, as we mentioned, was down at Vista Murrieta. Tim Dutton here was down over at Colton. And then, of course, Eric Paul Johnson over at Centennial this morning, which had a huge class. And some drama, too. Michael Eubank, our Player of the Year, the quarterback for the Huskies, making his decision kind of late or toying with people on his decision. Let's talk about that, EPJ.
Yeah, Michael Eubank was one of those ones who at Centennial's big signing party. Everyone had their schools listed on the table. There was a big blank spot in front of Michael Eubank because he announced his decision at a television network late this afternoon. Michael had the original commitment to Arizona State, but in the last couple of weeks, Utah and Pittsburgh put in offers and made a big push to get him on there. In the end, Michael Eubank decides he's going to go to, he's on his way to Tempe here, and he is going to be a Sun Devil for Arizona State. He really enjoyed the coaching staff there. He believes it's a program that can be on the rise. It just needs a quarterback that can get him over that next level, and he believes he can be the one to take him to that next level.
Continuing the strong ties to Arizona State from the Norco Corona area as well.
Right.
How many players that make it now from Corona and Norco in that team?
Just off the top of my head, and then you got to remember Brent Walker, the Norco offensive lineman, is headed to Arizona State as well. But besides that, you have Vontez Burfict, Shelly Lyons, Brandon McGee, Will Sutton, Lee Adams, all Centennial guys, and then also Adam Tello and Garth Gerhardt from Norco.
Right.
So close to 10 or 12.
DeAndre Lewis, sure, right?
And DeAndre Lewis from Norco
right.
as well, and Sam Bradford. Also there, not Sam Brad, Carl Bradford from Norco.
Right. Sam Bradford's with the Rams.
Right, yeah, Carl Bradford who redshirted.
Sam Bradford shows up at Arizona State, News on 11.
But yeah, Carl Bradford's also there. So yeah, you're looking at about 8 or 9 Centennial players and about 4 or 5 Norco players.
It's sort of interesting how Eubank at the beginning of the season had no love whatsoever, and then you've heard though that's not necessarily surprising because considering people wanted to see what he was able to do as a full-time starter.
Right. I talked to Alan Wallace over at Super Prep Magazine, who basically said they knew offers were going to come. Mm-hmm. How big of those offers would be depended on his play throughout the year. I mean, Utah measured, his official measurements came in at 6'6", 235 pounds, given his speed and his arm. Everyone just wanted to see how he'd handle the pressure as a full-time starter, and he did not disappoint this year, which is why we saw SEC, Big 12, Big 10, now the Pac-12 schools all coming after him in the late stages here.
I wonder how much Cam Newton's season helped with that whole process. I mean, here you have a quarterback with a big arm, and also great running ability as well.
And I think the other thing that might have helped Eubank in the end is the success that Matt Scott and Taylor Martinez have had, previous Centennial quarterbacks, that I think people know that they're going to be getting a quarterback who can run a system pretty well.
Right. All right. Let's talk about the rest of Centennial and the Big Eight. A huge day for Centennial. What else happened with the Big Eight and Centennial today?
Right. Centennial ended up with 6 total football players signing. You figure besides Eubank, Barrington Collins, the running back, going to Weber State, Larry Scott, the receiver, going to Oregon State, Ryan Jack going to San Diego, linebacker going to San Diego State. Deion Bass, cornerback, going to Idaho, and Horatio Salazar, safety, going to Nebraska Kearney. So not their biggest football signing class,
right,
but they had a celebration of all of their athletes throughout all of the sports, and there were 17 total athletes who have signed in the early signing period or today on National Signing Day, which is their largest recruiting class.
Impressive day nonetheless for them as well.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Very interesting. All right, let's go over to Tim Dutton for a minute because there's some drama with Rancho Verde. There's always some drama with Rancho Verde in some capacity, but 2 of their best players may be wavering on where they're going to go. Is that right?
Yeah, Ryan Henderson is still kind of a 50-50 shot. At least that's what's out there. A lot of people think he's going to go to USC because that's where Junior Palme looks like he's going, but apparently he liked Utah quite a bit. But he's kind of on the fence. He's undecided. Junior Palme, a lot of people thought he was going to go to USC as well, and then his dad came out and basically told people that is where he's going. They're going on here shortly on a webcast to go ahead and announce where they're going, and the speculation seems to be that they wanted to do it as a package deal, so they're probably both going to wind up at USC.
Well, Palme, I mean, we've seen a lot of him, and clearly one of the best players we had last year. I mean, his skills were very, very impressive, to say the least.
Yeah, one of the other things that's interesting with Ryan Henderson, we see a lot of kids who are afraid of weather issues, and apparently Ryan Henderson is someone who actually enjoyed the snow in Utah. So, that's not something that's deferring.
Right.
Him, so.
All right, Prep Dog, you were down in Vista Murrieta. What was the scene like there today?
Well, as I mentioned before, in our earlier attempt at this broadcast, it was, compared to Chaparral on Monday, Vista Murrieta was kind of like Candyland today, with the balloons.
I like how you always put on our flaws, by the way. It's always great. Thank you.
And I don't like your shirt either. And they
had that jacket you're wearing. Where'd you pick that up at?
Garage sale.
I figured as much.
Yeah, they had the balloons out and the cake, and Coley was, we're so glad you're here, and all this stuff. And so they were all a lot of smiles at Vista Murrieta. There's
always a lot of smiles. It's a happy place down there, right?
It's kind of like Disneyland.
Yeah, exactly. All right, what else do you expect from your coverage area as far as commitments go? There's been a few, early commitments, I know, but talk about that for a minute in the Southwestern League.
Yeah, well, at Vista Murrieta, you had Derek Brown and then Jonathan Sanchez and then Giovanni Slater, who is a football player.
Right. But he's going to track,
He's
right?
going to run track at USC.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then, at Chaparral, you have Darius Guillory, who probably is suited to be a receiver, but he played mostly running back this season.
Well, didn't he play running back toward the end of the season? Wasn't it? He was sort of a late running back?
Right. Yeah, about midway on,
Right.
like from the Centennial game.
Right.
And he's going to San Diego State.
Can we say that San Diego State had the best recruiting class of the Inland Empire, Inland Southern California? They had a lot of guys, right?
They definitely had the most. I think we have 7 total guys if you include Paul Pitts, the receiver over at Los Osos. USC right now might end up with one of the strongest classes, which is, given the fact that they're still on probation,
right?
Is going to be great. They may have lost their number 1 recruit, Anthony Thomas from Crenshaw, but, Junior Pome, Ryan Henderson, likely both of those going to USC, and then you think Devontae Wilson, the defensive lineman from Corona, also
Zink's
headed
out
to
there.
USC.
Zink's out there celebrating the Anthony Thomas one. He's been out there gloating the whole day that he might be going to Oregon. All right, Mr. Dutton.
Because it's a bad day for UCLA.
Right.
Bad year for UCLA.
Yeah. Mr. Dutton, you were over.
When isn't it a bad day for UCLA?
It'll be tonight when they lose to USC in basketball, and you owe me $10, Zink. The Colton situation, they had a great season, and then they had 3 kids move on. Talk about your experience at Colton today, Tim.
Colton's pretty cool. It's one of the few one-school areas around. They had a big crowd in the auditorium where they did the theater productions and that kind of thing. Balloons a whole bit, all for 3 guys. It's kind of an annual thing where they bring everybody in and they celebrate people going on to signing. So Rodney Hardwick's there. He's going to the University of Oregon. Tyler Irvin's going to San Jose State. John Taylor going to Sacramento State. And they had family there, and Coach Bray was there talking about him, and kind of a neat little tradition they do every year out there.
Well, that was certainly one of the better stories of the season was Colton. Let's go back around to Eric Paul Johnson. Some other notable signings today as well on your radar, EPJ.
Yeah, kind of looking at me, you got to look at Norco. I think potentially with only 3, maybe a smaller class for Norco, but 3 guys who can make impacts. Kelsey Young, obviously. Running back at Stanford. We know the history already with Norco plus Stanford running backs with Toby Gerhart. How will Kelsey Young fit in there? Brent Walker potentially could be an impact offensive lineman at Arizona State. And Greg Henderson at Colorado, I think a really good pickup for them. Nebraska was a school that was trying to get Henderson to, back out of that commitment, but he ends up sticking with Colorado, so I think that's a really good class. Santiago had a pretty big class given they weren't a playoff team.
Right.
So you think Jamon Hazley, receiver, going to San Diego State, Ajiro Ederain, linebacker, going to Fresno State. You have Nnamdi Agudi, another receiver, going to Sacramento State. So this is a good class for them as well.
All right. So interesting day for all around here. Tim, and you also covered the San Andreas League as well. Were there any others out of the San Andreas League?
Paul Rodriguez is one of those kids locally who's going to San Diego State. I'm trying to think off the top of my head who some of the other guys are. One of the interesting things there, we're talking about people who are going places. Their league MVP on offense and defense right now aren't really locked up anywhere.
Right.
Cajon quarterback Thomas Carter, not sure where he's going to wind up. He may wind up going JC as an athlete. Devon Hussey, another guy who He's 5'8", which a lot of people are scared to death of, putting him in, at the Division I level. Coach Bray was saying that he may wind up at Azusa Pacific with a decent amount of financial aid.
Weren't people saying, though, like, wasn't it Tony Burrell saying that Devon Hussey was one of the best guys he had in the All-Star game? I mean, wasn't there a lot of praise for him as far as his tenacity on the football field?
Well, Devon Hussey had one of the highlights of the year,
right.
As far as I'm concerned. Semifinal game against Cajon. Thomas Carter's the Cajon quarterback. He's the defending league champion at 100 meters, and he's got a 5-yard advantage over Hussey, and he's on his way up the middle of the end zone, and Devon Hussey, tracked him down.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, few players have a faster motor than
right.
Hussey. He's one of those guys that, unfortunately, if he was 2 inches taller, he'd probably have his Division I scholarship out there. But at 5'8", scaring people off. I think the same reason Barrington Collins, the running back at Centennial, only 5'7", scaring a lot of people off,
right.
whether or not he can handle that. But if he was 5'10", 190 pounds, he'd probably have a Pac-10 offer.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, Prep Dog, your final thoughts on recruiting for the day? You're kind of circling some names that you thought stood out in the Citrus Belt League.
I thought he was doing the crossword puzzle.
Oh, I thought he was too.
Which, if we left it out, we'd hear about it.
Or he's looking for yard sales to find more clothing.
Jordan Smith, Redlands, offensive lineman. He's going to San Diego State. And kind of a late signing, John Salega, the defensive tackle from Redlands, is going to Portland State. And then Josh Armstrong of Rev, the defensive back and a playmaker. I believe he's going to Sacramento State.
Interesting.
And I'm glad to see John Saliga. He's one of those football players that impressed every coach that they played against, especially the Norco coaches. And when the Norco coaches after a game make sure to seek you out to say what a player you are, that's someone who's
right.
going to make an impact.
Right, absolutely. All right, let's transition to a second to some coaching changes. Let's go. I'm not sure who I direct this to, but I'll just throw it out there now. We've seen some coaching changes. Obviously, the Chaparral job will be the biggest one. But 2 openings in Hemet. Notre Dame is filled by Oris Stekovich, former Ramona coach, and helped restart the Chaffee College program. I guess he graduated there with Zink, right? Is that right? Zink's over there rah-rahing. Talk about that deal. Because Notre Dame going back to basically, I don't know, another retiree to be their coach?
Yeah, I mean, with Bob Burt stepping out after a couple years, Oris Stekovich gets back into the game. He obviously, in 1982, led Ramona to a co-championship. They get a Notre Dame grad. He graduated in 1969. It's something that I think is a good fit for them, as they wouldn't be able to get an on-campus coach. Getting someone who's retired would be a perfect person out there. And obviously, I think Orist is a guy who can fill out a couple years. I think in the background, everyone's got to be wondering the future down the line. Is Derek Johnson potentially the Notre Dame head coach for the deep future, perhaps? And Orist would be a guy who can maybe provide that bridge. But who knows? Orist is, I believe 60 years old. He's probably got a few years that he can get out there. So.
Right. Actually, if you think about it, in 1969, he's probably playing as Notre Dame was making a run at some CIF championships, and
the next year they ended up winning the title. So he would have been out there with, Marvin Cobb and companies. So.
Bob Stengel Sr., the head coach at the time.
Correct.
What other coaching changes can we expect, or have we seen already? Who wants to answer this one? EPJ or Prep Dog?
Well, I could, we could look at the Citrus Belt League, where Jeff Strykula is out at Miller,
right.
And then also Lance Ozier at Fontana. And, I think one thing to look at there is not all these schools can just create faculty positions like UKIPA can, apparently.
Right.
And so you pretty much, you want to have an on-campus guy, but somebody's got to be willing to do it. And I don't know who would be willing to do it on those campuses.
It's going to be a very interesting take with those 2 schools. I mean, Fontana's had so many problems being relevant over the last few years, and there's some changes, right? I mean, they may be going out of the Citrus Belt League. Is that the plan now for the?
That's the big rumor, that they could find them out of the Citrus Belt League for the first time.
Unimaginable to many of us.
In a couple months,
right? We'll be checking that re-leaguing. What other coaching changes are out there, EPJ?
You still have King as yet to be filled, so that's an obvious big one out there. Tockwitz did fill their position today, hiring Hamilton coach Dennis Gregovich. So, the King one is one of the more intriguing ones out there. But like I said, we're in that era where schools can't just create teaching jobs.
Right.
And coaches who may be interested in the job but are in other school districts don't want to leave their teaching job and their years of tenure to go into a brand new school. So, you think of some big names out there. Obviously, Tommy Leach has got to be out there. Doug Du Bois, the former Citrus Hill coach, is out there. Another job opening that's out there is obviously Canyon Springs. So there are a lot of job openings out there. Now, the interesting thing I've heard from an assistant coach over at Rancho Verde was a certain name, a well-known coach from the area in the past might be in the area, and that could be John Tyree, the longtime Fontana and Miller coach. Could be.
Stop it.
Has been looking.
And Ramona, too.
Yeah, and has been.
Blythe, didn't he coach at Palo Verde for a little while?
Yeah, I believe he also coached.
Wouldn't this be like his fourth stop?
And his one title that he won was, I believe, at Imperial. So,
Imperial, right.
So.
I think he won a coach championship with Muir, didn't he?
He won the coach championship at Muir. So, but I have heard that he might be putting his name out there. And, Bob Burt.
He's got to be at least 93 now. Just kidding.
But, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how many of these jobs are filled. But, like I said, that big thing of, trying to create a job and whether or not we'll see well-known coaches swap districts, it's tough to do. I think you're going to see a lot of in-district hires right now.
Well, and I think that's some of the things we're seeing. As you guys pointed out, that they're making some safe decisions with coaches who are already on staff or who are already in the district. And yeah, I think it's going to be very difficult for someone to leave a job they have now for uncertainty, in another district. All right, real quick, Verde guys, give me a quick hit on the areas you're covering. Let's start with Tim Dutton first. You've got boys soccer or something like that. What are you covering in the winter time right now?
Boys soccer, lots of big games. We're coming down to the last week next week, so got a big game this Friday. City rivals Corona and Santiago. Santiago in a very good league has yet to lose a league match. Southwestern League, very tight race. You've got Great Oak competing with Chaparral and Murrieta Valley. Got Lakeside, team that nobody's really looking at. They're undefeated overall for the entire season. They have a win over Great Oak, and still they're only number 6 in the CIF poll. So I'm really curious to see how they do.
And who's covering wrestling these days? Because I think we lost our wrestling guy.
Right.
Yeah, so we're gonna figure that one out.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go over to EPJ in the Big 8. A lot of drama there, and boys basketball and girls basketball as well. Talk about that one for a moment.
Yeah, right now for basketball, Centennial kind of pulling away in the boys basketball race, but they have an interesting dilemma. Michael Caffey suffered a pretty decent ankle injury last night. They were getting results on maybe some MRIs. That's their standout point guard going to Long Beach. They lose him. That would really hurt him. He was at their celebration of Athletes Day, and he was putting some pressure on the ankle, so it doesn't look like a break or anything serious, but he could be out for a little while. In the girls' race, Santiago kind of has been a surprise team given that they lost the Lister's twins from last year, but they've managed to stay on top. They're undefeated in league play. They have their big game against Centennial on Thursday. If they win that, they clinch another championship there.
All right, Zink, I'll tell you that one here in a minute. I see you over there struggling with the passwords. Okay, well, let's talk about with Mr. Garage Sale Meister over here.
Don't touch me, man.
You're really hostile, man. I'm just trying to make you better.
A little too much coffee.
What time did you get up this morning to get down there?
It was 12:15, so not
it wasn't that bad. You actually had lunch down there, probably.
It's not like this. It's not like the old 6 o'clock run.
Right.
Went to IHOP.
Right. All right. Let's talk about your basketball areas of interest. What do you got going on?
Well, I saw Ike last night, and they took it to Rev.
Well, they really took it to him in the second half too, didn't they?
Rev was without Terrell Todd, but Ike had already beaten them. By 10 or 15 points in the earlier game. Rev played very well early on, but Bernard Ireland was just sensational last night, hitting from three-point land, taking it inside. Again, Ike, doesn't really have a big guy, but they're just so athletic and quick. So they're dominating that league now. And then, of course, you have Murrieta Valley in the Southwestern League, led by Justin Gudger. So well coached, so fundamentally sound. And then turning to my other sport, water polo, the Rev girls are kind of an interesting story. They're shooting for, they have the CBL title wrapped up, but they'll be shooting for their first ever section title, they hope. And then in the Southwestern League, of course, Murrieta Valley is always good.
You're just hoping they don't have another 1-point loss in the championship game.
I don't want that. I don't think that Brian Linton wants that or deserves
Right.
it.
All right, guys, thanks a lot for joining us here on this kind of impromptu HS Game Time Live. We appreciate it very much, and we'll talk to you guys here again real soon.